Hey everybody, I want to talk about that first draft that we're getting to write this week. And this isn't going to be the rubric discussion, but this is going to be why I don't want you to be disappointed that this draft is not going to be awesome. We are not expecting perfection, and you should not go into this expecting it to be the final product. And I know we've talked about this quite a bit in the past weeks, and in the discussion boards, and even one-on-one with some of you, on why we as writers, especially beginning writers or writers who are trying to improve their craft, have to understand that our first draft is not meant to be perfect. It's not meant to be the end. And if you dive into this first draft expecting it to be perfect, you're doing yourself a disservice and your characters and your stories a disservice. It is called a first draft for a reason. It's the first time we are actually getting everything together and drawn. And I actually want to read just a real quick from our textbook, the little blurb that Dufresne puts on his chapter, Getting Black on White. He quotes Elizabeth Hardwick as saying, "It's one of the things writing students don't understand. They write a first draft and are quite disappointed, or often should be disappointed. They don't understand that they have merely begun, that they may be merely beginning even the second or third draft." It's very common for us to want to dive in and make this draft perfect, and we have to break away from that. Not because our writing is imperfect. Maybe that first draft is going to be grammatically wonderful. Maybe we get our dialogue down that first time and the setting is great. But that first draft, we're getting our ideas out, and we have not really put our characters in this situation. If this is the first draft, the first time you're writing this story, you haven't really learned how your characters are going to respond. You're responding with them. So we have to be willing to realize and be open to revising. Once we write down our first draft, we then, as Dufresne says, he says a lot of stuff, and he says it all with such passion. You know, that's one of the great things, and perhaps slightly irritating things about this text. He is so passionate about everything. But once we write that first draft down, we can sit back and reflect. All right, is this the way we wanted Johnny to respond? Well, maybe not. Maybe Johnny surprised us. But if we change this a little bit, if we, instead of giving him coffee for breakfast, which he's had a lifelong addiction to, maybe we, for whatever reason, have him take tea with his breakfast instead of coffee. How is that going to change? Maybe we can step back and analyze that dialogue and see how it is great, but maybe if we make it a little stronger in the wording here, can make it overall that much more effective. But perhaps the most important thing about just being willing to write that first draft, we really get to see our characters in action, see what they want to do and how they're hitting those goals, how they're dealing with those obstacles and the opposition that we're throwing at them. We really get to see and know how our characters respond. You have to remember, and we'll go over this quite a bit, that plot is not about what we want for the story. Plot is about how the characters respond. As writers, we of course have creative control, and we can decide what obstacles we want the characters to go through. But often, dare I say almost always, the plot contrivances, the obstacles that we put our characters through, that first draft will almost always not be as great as we want them to be. So we change it a little bit. Instead of having a conflict with one character, maybe we have two. Instead of our characters meeting up to have that big conflict in the ladies' bathroom, we do it in a public setting. By writing it all out, getting it out of our head and onto our paper, we allow ourselves as the creators to see if it's really working. For example, one of the stories that we have been reading on and off, or at least I've been presenting to you with the option to read on and off, is my story about Mavis and her meeting up with her lady friend at the bar that used to be their place until Mavis went into recovery and became a recovering alcoholic. At first, I didn't have her meeting anybody in that story. I just was having her go into the bar and dealing with her old demons. And the first draft was okay. but it was missing something. And with my intention with that story, it was just to show the inner conflict. It was a piece for a class like this, actually, where we were focusing on literary fiction. And so I wanted her to go into the bar and face all those empty glasses and look at all the bottles and the liquor that were behind the bartender, who was actually a friend of hers before she went into rehab. And it didn't seem powerful enough. So I asked Mavis if there was anybody that she wanted to see at that bar that might add conflict. Is there anything that she needed to hash out? And it turns out that she did. She needed to have words with her former lover, and that added that depth and conflict that was missing from my first draft. So when we say our first drafts are going to be shit, to quote the great Hemingway, it doesn't mean that your writing's going to be bad. It doesn't mean that your grammar's going to be bad. It doesn't even mean that the story's going to be bad. It means that it's going to be incomplete. You are writing your first draft. There will be multiple drafts, many drafts, and maybe only 2. It depends on how much time you spent getting to know these guys, how much thought and just idly ruminating you've done on the various scenarios that these characters will have with each other. But I don't want to say don't be disappointed, because you might be, and that's okay. But allow yourself to be disappointed with the quality of your first draft, not just this first draft, but any first draft that you write. It's okay if it's not where you want it to be, because you're going to get it there. Revision is a necessary process for any writer, or any type of writing, be it fiction, nonfiction, or even poetry. So be willing to write not perfect stuff. Let's turn that editor off. I know it's easier said than done. Let's turn that inner critic off. I know that's easier said than done. But let's try to allow ourselves to write incomplete, to even write bad stuff. It's okay. It's a work in progress. And we'll get you there through revisions. We'll get you there through talking about it. And you'll get yourself there through spending more and more time with these characters and developing that plot. So, be willing to do mediocre stuff, and that mediocre stuff is going to turn into amazing writing. If you have any questions at all, you know how to reach me. It's going to be great, even if it's not great just yet.